also annoyed by Little Red. However, Little Red had wings after all, and its speed was agile. The two of them could not do anything to each other. The alligator roared and took advantage of Little Red's attack. It suddenly stood up and bit towards Little Red. Little Red was like a red flame as it quickly flew through the air and dropped a few bright red feathers. Lin Bai could vaguely see that there was a shadow under the water, but it was not clear. It seemed that there was something stirring inside. He immediately had a bad premonition and secretly raised his vigilance. Because Little Green was small and the explosion crocodile was in the water, it was temporarily not of any use to the situation. The explosion crocodile was currently fighting with Little Red. As for Lin Bai, it didn't consider Lin Bai a threat at all. To the crocodile, Lin Bai was just an ant, but it didn't notice that the ant in his eyes had already quietly approached. Lin Bai gathered the strength of his palms with both hands and found the most vulnerable part of the explosive crocodile's head. A dazzling white light shot out from his hands. It was brilliant and incomparably powerful. By the time the exploding crocodile noticed it, it was already too late. Boom! The octane blast and the heaven-devouring myriad phase art were activated at the same time. It was as if a mountain was toppling over. Heaven and earth were turned upside down as they hit the head of the exploding crocodile. It was as if fireworks had exploded. One could even hear the sound of bones breaking. The head of the explosion crocodile fell straight into the water, creating a huge splash. What was strange was that its body was floating on the surface of the water and did not sink. Little Red circled low, wanting to find out what was going on. Lin Bai looked at the place where he found the shadow. The two shadows were no longer there. Sensing that something was wrong, he hurriedly shouted, "Be careful!" Almost at the same time, the water splashed in all directions. Another head popped out. Its sharp fangs were about to bite Little Red's neck, but they were suddenly interrupted by Lin Bai. It opened its mouth unwillingly and shot out a few ice arrows in Little Red's direction. Wherever they passed, even the temperature dropped. Little Red's flying speed slowed down when its wings touched it. The explosion crocodile's gaze landed on Lin Bai. This time, its beast eyes flickered with a scarlet and brutal light. Its gaze was as if it wanted to skin Lin Bai and pull out his tendons. The explosive crocodile just now actually had two heads. If it wasn't for Lin Bai's reminder, Little Red's head would have already been chopped off. The man and the beast were both a little surprised, but Lin Bai felt that things weren't over yet. A chill came from behind him, as if something dangerous was approaching. Lin Bai hurriedly rolled to the side, and a huge fireball descended from the sky, instantly creating a deep pit. Another head popped out from the side. Three-headed explosion crocodile. Even Lin Bai couldn't help but gasp. It had their heads, one poisonous fog, one icicle, and one raging fire. Each head was at Xintian level 1, and together, they were above level 3. If it weren't for the fact that a head had been knocked off just now, it would have been even more troublesome to deal with. The explosion crocodile had suffered quite a number of injuries from its previous carelessness. Although it hated Lin Bai to the bone, it did not act rashly. Clearly, its intelligence was not low either. Lin Bai stood on the mountain by the shore while the explosive crocodile was in the water. The man and the beast looked at each other, and the atmosphere became even more tense. He had a premonition that a fierce battle would follow. The explosion, three-headed crocodile glared at Lin Bai. Even though one of its heads had already been destroyed by Lin Bai, the remaining two were still not easy to deal with. Instead, they had fallen into a frenzy. Bubbles began to appear on the originally calm surface of the lake. They grew larger and larger. A dark vortex began to condense in the middle of the lake. The clear and transparent waters gradually became darker, and the scene inside could not be seen clearly. Half of the exploding three-headed crocodile's body appeared above the surface of the water, and its two heads looked even more ferocious. It looked like a prehistoric giant beast as it opened its mouth aggressively. Boom! A water dragon descended from the sky and charged toward Lin Bai. The dragon's eyes were bright, and it bared its fangs and brandished its claws. It gave off a supreme dignity, as if it was a real dragon. A dense and cold water vapor rushed towards him, instantly freezing one's blood. Just as it was about to approach, a green light flashed rapidly and blocked in front of Lin Bai. It was Little Green, who had not made a move all this while. As it turned out, when it saw the scarlet lawn bird and the three exploding crocodiles fighting, its heart had long been itching for an opportunity to show itself. Naturally, it could not wait to rush forward. Although Little Green's figure was smaller than the water dragon, it was agile. It was like a green chain that instantly wrapped around the water dragon, trapping it within and preventing it from moving. The dragon's roars continued, but it was useless. After all, it was still an illusion. So how could it compare to Little Green, who had the bloodline of a true dragon? The water dragon's figure became dimmer and dimmer until it finally disappeared in the air. The water droplets that filled the sky suddenly fell back to the surface of the lake. The three-headed exploding crocodiles saw that their attack was easily neutralized by Little Green, and their beast eyes became more and more irritable. Roar! With a sharp cry, the entire surface of the lake became boiling like boiling water. However, the temperature in the air became lower and lower, and light blue ice crystals condensed on the grass and trees. It was difficult for them to defend against the severe cold, and they gradually withered. This layer of ice crystals rapidly expanded outward at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was obviously very hot in midsummer, but the temperature in the water area was terrifyingly low, as if they were in the middle of winter. Lin Bai felt a bone-piercing chill and immediately opened his defensive barrier, enveloping him, Little Green and Little Red. It was unknown when it started to rain, but when the raindrops fell on the ground, they created a deep pit. Lin Bai had an ominous premonition in his heart. He saw the explosive crocodile spew out cold air. In the blink of an eye, the raindrops formed an ice cone floating in the air, surrounding the man and the two beasts. He didn't expect it to have such an ability. Seeing the explosive three-headed crocodile slowly approaching, Lin Bai would have to expend a lot of energy if he were to fight it head-on, not to mention whether his defensive barrier would be able to withstand it. Little Green, distribute fog. It was damp here, and there was a water area nearby. The three-headed explosion crocodile relied on its advantage here to be able to summon wind and rain. Little Green was also of the water attribute and had the bloodline of a true dragon. It could also do the same. As soon as it finished speaking, the green mist slowly rose and swallowed Lin Bai's figure. The three-headed alligator immediately lost its attack direction, and the icicles fell to the ground. It walked around restlessly. It knew that the enemy was here, but it lost its direction. Its heavy and hurried breathing could be heard, like a huge bellows. Lin Bai was nearby. A stream of divine power slashed at the three-headed explosive crocodile's body like a sharp sword. The originally indestructible scales suddenly split open, revealing the flesh inside. The three-headed explosive crocodile suddenly bit down, but missed. Lin Bai arrived on another tree like a ghost. Bang! Unable to bite down, the three-headed explosion crocodile was like a headless fly. It began to rampage. It kept feeling that Lin Bai was right beside it, but missed. Lin Bai relied on his ability to see and use of sneak attacks on the three-headed explosion crocodile from time to time. Even though it could not cause fatal damage to the crocodile, it had broken through its defense. Its strong tail swept behind it like a hammer. It was like a merciless bulldozer that knocked down towering trees one after another, trying to find traces of Lin Bai. Seeing that the three-headed explosion crocodile had once again revealed its weak point, it was just about to go forward when one of its heads turned around and almost caught Lin Bai off guard. It turned out that the three-headed explosive crocodile had also learned its lesson and wanted to bait him, so it deliberately revealed its weak point. The temperature suddenly rose, and its bloody mouth was just inches away from Lin Bai. A stinky wind blew over, and countless flames were like lava. For a moment, it was as if a volcano had erupted. Fortunately, Lin Bai suddenly bent down and rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding it. Even so, his clothes and hair could not help but be stained with sparks, and the faint smell of his hair being burnt could still be felt. Damn it, 3 heads with 3 elements. The huge flames soared into the sky, as if the entire forest was about to be set ablaze. The moisture in the air was evaporated, and at the same time, the green fog was dispersed. The 3-headed explosive crocodile finally saw Lin Bai's figure. It was like a cannonball, and its scarlet beast eyes were filled with bone-deep hatred. After all the wounds on its body were caused by this person in front of it. Along the way, it kept spitting out flames like a volcano erupting. Wherever it passed, the ground was scorched. The tongues of fire raged, giving rise to countless manic fire beasts that crazily destroyed everything in front of it. The raging flames were about to swallow Lin Bai whole. A clear cry could be heard. The scarlet swan was blocking in front of it. It flapped its wings, and its entire body shone with golden light. Looking at the raging flames, it actually swallowed them in one gulp. With the Phoenix bloodline, why would Little Red be afraid of these things? After all, who had the ability to compete with a phoenix in fire? Even if the bloodline in its body had not been activated, it was more than enough to deal with the three-headed explosion crocodile's flames. The scarlet swan pecked at its feathers. After swallowing the flames, it became even redder and brighter, as if it was plated with a faint layer of golden light. It seemed as if it still had some unfinished business. The three-headed explosion crocodile was extremely unwilling to accept the fact that its attacks had been neutralized again and again. It let out a long cry, and a huge fireball slowly condensed in the air, just like the sun. The scarlet swan bird's eyes were also burning with fighting spirit, and it also opened its mouth widely. It was the true fire that contained the power of the phoenix. The two forces collided in the air, and a huge airflow swept to the side. Fire meteors fell from the sky one after another, creating a dreamlike scene. Lin Bai gathered the spiritual power in his hand and followed closely behind. Along with the power of the true fire, it hit the body of the explosion three-headed crocodile. Boom! The remaining two heads of the explosive three-headed crocodile were also hit. They rolled into the water and dyed a part of the water red. If it were any other ordinary person, they wouldn't even have time to run for their lives when facing the explosion three-headed crocodile, let alone fight it. Even if the people from the 4 great academies joined forces to deal with it, it would still be difficult. It was simply unbelievable if news of Lin Bai single-handedly destroying it with 2 pet beasts spread out. This explosive three-headed crocodile is indeed difficult to deal with. Lin Bai held onto the tree trunk and panted slightly. Other than his slightly tattered body, there were traces of icicles and raging flames on his clothes, but there were no other obvious wounds. If not for the fact that the explosive three-headed crocodile had underestimated its enemy and lost a head, the fierce battle would not have ended even now. The biggest reason why this area of water was called the Crystal Lake was because of its beautiful scenery, as if it was a fairyland. The surface of the lake was like a crystal embedded in the forest, hence its name. However, there were also powerful demonic beasts guarding it at the same time, and ordinary people didn't dare to enter easily. The 4 great academies had deep foundations, and they had a part of the map of the Mystic Yuan's secret realm, thus they avoided this place. Lin Bai unexpectedly barged into this place by accident and even met the leader of the demonic beast, the exploding three-headed crocodile. He meditated for a moment and soon recovered. This place was originally a paradise. Now it was not only riddled with potholes, but even the vegetation had been lifted up, revealing black scorched soil. Beside it were broken trees. It was a complete mess. The crystal lake was even more turbid, stained with an ominous blood color. The huge beast corpse floated in it. Even though the three-headed crocodile was dead, its 3 heads still retained the malevolence and unwillingness from when it was alive. Anyone who saw this scene could not help but feel apprehensive. Hiss, hiss. Next to it, Little Green was anxiously sticking out its tongue. Its entire body was emitting a faint green light, as if something was surging within it. It struggled to come out. That ball of light swam all over its body and finally arrived at the 7 inches above its head. It was restless. The tip of its tail slapped the ground hard, stirring up a cloud of dust. Little Green, what's wrong with you? Everyone knew that the snake's 7 inches was the most fatal part. It rolled on the ground in pain, giving Lin Bai a fright. He hurriedly took a step forward to check its condition. Lin Bai condensed spiritual power from his palm and poured it into Little Green's body, slightly smoothing out the restless spiritual power. Only then did he know that Little Green was actually shown signs of a breakthrough after the battle just now, but it was just a little bit short of an opportunity. I see. The explosive three-headed crocodile had just died, and the cultivation in its body had not completely dissipated. Lin Bai hurriedly stretched out his hand and absorbed all of this into his body. Then, he passed it on to Little Green, who was in urgent need of a breakthrough. Little Green, who was still struggling fiercely, suddenly relaxed its body. Even its expression became calm. Lin Bai placed it on the ground. He could only see a huge spell formation covering its entire body, but he could not see clearly what was inside. At the same time, an incomparably huge phantom slowly rose from Little Green's back. Its body was endless. Its head and tail were nowhere to be seen. Its head was like a camel, its horns were like a deer, its eyes were like a rabbit, its ears were like a cow, its neck was like a snake, its abdomen was like a clam, its scales were like a carp, its claws were like an eagle, and its palms were like a tiger. It was a majestic true dragon. The scarlet swan bird, which was originally circling in the sky, sensed an inexplicable ancient pressure. At this time, it also retracted its wings and stopped on a branch at the side, silently watching Little Green's transformation. The true dragon's shadow flashed past and quickly entered Little Green's body. It was so fast that Lin Bai almost thought it was an illusion, but the faint residual power in the air could not fool anyone. After an unknown amount of time, the light finally gradually dissipated. Lin Bai finally saw clearly that Little Green's body had become longer. The bulge on its head had finally turned into a small horn. The claws on its abdomen were still short and small, looking like ornaments. However, the flickering cold light spoke volumes about its sharpness. Lin Bai received Little Green's excitement and joy. This time, not only had it obtained the explosive three-headed crocodile skill, Icicle, but it had also leveled up Emanate Fog to Poisonous Fog. This had the effect of causing the enemy to lose their direction while also dealing a certain amount of damage. Just as Lin Bai and Little Green were feeling happy, the scarlet swan on the other side suddenly opened its mouth wide and spat out a mouthful of pure flame. The color of this flame was different from what they had seen before. The outside was actually a faint golden color, as if it was surrounded by the light of the sun. The inside was pure red, as if the red sun had just been born. The most surprising thing was that the flame did not have any temperature. Even Lin Bai, who was so close to it, could not feel any burning aura. Boom! However, when it landed on the ground, it suddenly burned a huge pit. One could imagine its power. The scarlet swan burped. As if it was showing off, it spread its wings and circled above Lin Bai's head. From time to time, it would spit out a small ring of fire, and its gorgeous tail feathers would pass through it. Those who did not know the truth would think that it was performing acrobatics. Lin Bai did not know whether to laugh or cry when he saw it. It turned out that the scarlet swan's true fire had also absorbed the three-headed exploding crocodiles, Raging Fire, and turned into a 6th grade, Sun True Fire. It was much higher than the 3rd grade of fire of the Green Lotus medicine shop. If an ordinary flame wanted to level up, the requirements were extremely harsh. Not only did it have to swallow another type of flame, but it also had many restrictions. The main reason was that the scarlet swan had the phoenix bloodline in its body. When a phoenix controlled fire, the true fire would naturally have a different reaction. That was why it was so easy. If it was an ordinary person, whether they could succeed or not would be a problem. The two pet beasts had both leveled up their skills, but Little Green had also broken through. Based on the principle of not wasting resources, Lin Bai's gaze fell on the three-headed crocodile's corpse. In just a few moments, it was as if he was chopping vegetables and melons. The huge beast body was quickly dismembered, and he quickly found the inner core. When he felt it, there he found that there was actually 3 more, and he was instantly overjoyed. Good fellow, it was not in vain for me to fight with it for so long. It was worth 3 at a time. In front of it were 3 extremely round inner cores. One was covered in green shadows, one was glowing with water and ice-cold air, and the other was a scarlet flame. 3 inner cores in one go. It saved me the trouble of looking for other demon beasts. I can try that pill recipe. This was the territory of the exploding 3-headed crocodile. Ordinary demonic beasts would definitely not dare to enter. Refining pills here was a good choice, and there was no need to look for a new place. Refining pills also had requirements on the environment, and it would also affect the quality of the pills. The spiritual energy here was abundant, and there was the residual power of the exploding three-headed crocodile. It was the most suitable place. Even so, Lin Bai did not let down his guard. He let Little Green and Little Red guard him while he began to prepare the pills. Lin Bai took out the cauldron that he had bought from the Green Lotus medicine shop from his storage bag. Rather than calling it a cauldron, it was more like a small broken furnace. Its entire body was pitch black and no different to a cooking furnace. It was also missing a corner. He had tried to clean it before, but it had no effect. He did not know what the black thing on the body of the cauldron was, but he could not get rid of it no matter how hard he tried. Therefore, Lin Bai just let it be. No one had ever taught Lin Bai how to concoct pills, so he had to fumble around on his own. In addition, Elder Xia had casually imparted a few words of knowledge to him, as well as a beginner-level pill concoction book. After reading for a long time, Lin Bai suddenly lost interest. It's all theory without any practical knowledge. Why don't I try it out myself? He threw the book to the side and looked at the 3 round and smooth inner cores before putting them in without hesitation. It was as if he was throwing something worthless. If an ordinary person saw it, they would definitely scold him for wasting heaven's gifts. This kind of demonic beast inner core could be considered high-grade. No matter what, it needed a precious cauldron to refine it in order to be able to release its full effect. But now, Lin Bai was using such a small broken furnace. The key was that it was his first time refining pills. It was already a blessing for a novice to be able to keep the furnace from exploding, let alone succeed. Generally, they would take worthless herbs to practice, and then use inner cores after they were familiar with the procedure. Yet, Lin Bai started with 3 precious inner cores. Lin Bai sat cross-legged with a small broken furnace placed in front of him. Because of the contract, he could share the pet skills, so he didn't need Little Red to light a fire for him. A ball of flame slowly condensed in his palm. It seemed mild and harmless, but it could burn everything. Thinking of the power of the Sun True Fire, Lin Bai couldn't help but worry if the small broken furnace could withstand it. If it burned through, how would find another cauldron in such a short time? Lin Bai carefully controlled the fire and approached the small broken furnace. If there was anything wrong, he would immediately take it back. Unexpectedly, the small broken furnace did not respond. He tried to increase the flame's power again, but it was still the same. As expected, my judgment is not wrong. Even though the small broken furnace looked unremarkable, like a useless cauldron, it was able to withstand the temperature of the Sun True Fire. Just from that, one could tell that the cauldron was extraordinary. Lin Bai carefully examined it a few more times and found that other than being able to withstand high temperatures, there was nothing special about it. The body of the cauldron did not change much, so he immediately focused his attention on refining the pill. Although he was still unable to understand the mystery behind it, he would find out about the origins of this small broken furnace sooner or later. The most important thing now was to refine this pill properly. Lin Bai focused all his attention on the 3 inner cores in the cauldron. White mist rose from the body of the cauldron and swirled around it. He increased the intensity of the fire, and the Sun True Fire lit up his face, causing it to turn slightly red. At the same time, he used his spiritual power to control the 3 inner cores to fuse together. Green, white, and red rays of light interweaved together. However, Lin Bai was extremely patient. It was as if he was peeling a cocoon, allowing them to gradually fuse together. After a moment, he added in a few more herbs that he needed to use. The moment the herbs were put in, they instantly turned into green juice that slowly flowed and dripped onto the 3 inner cores. Although the body of the cauldron did not seem to have any burning aura, the temperature inside was terrifyingly high. The contact between the herbs and the inner core seemed to produce some kind of mysterious reaction. The originally indestructible inner core actually collapsed quickly, and something seemed to have melted. Lin Bai controlled the juice. It was as if a light rain had fallen inside the cauldron. Countless green liquids gathered in it, almost drowning the original inner core. Their original color had become a little dim. The three inner cores finally showed signs of merging. They slowly approached and stuck together. Even so, there were still three colors on the body of the pills. They looked a little mottled, and there were still some impurities that had not been expelled. Seeing that the time was almost right, Lin Bai closed the lid of the cauldron. The sun true fire in his hand suddenly shot up high and instantly swallowed the small broken furnace. A faint black shadow could be seen. I wonder if I succeeded, Lin Bai muttered to himself. His eyes were burning as he stared at the small broken furnace. At the same time, the Grand Sun True Fire was maintained at the same level of power to avoid being too high or too cold, which would affect the final quality of the pill. After an unknown period of time, a faint medicinal fragrance that was refreshing to the heart and mind was transmitted over. Lin Bai's spirit was roused as he saw several rays of divine brilliance suddenly blossoming on the small broken furnace. They were like multicolored clouds that swept across the sky, dazzling and colorful. Those medicinal fragrances condensed and took shape. For a moment, they transformed into countless rare and precious herbs. All sorts of marvelous sights caused people to sigh in amazement. If those who knew how to concoct medicinal pills were here and saw this scene, they would definitely know that Lin Bai had succeeded. This was because only if he had succeeded would this happen. Moreover, it was a high-quality medicinal pill that would cause abnormal phenomena to appear. Is it going to work? Buzz. A clanging sound came from within the cauldron. Even the lid was blown away by the powerful airwave. Even Little Red and Little Green, who were on guard by the side, were attracted by this. They looked at the cauldron that was floating in midair with the words, "I want to eat," written all over their faces. Lin Bai extinguished the Grand Sun True Fire and carefully opened the lid of the cauldron. He saw that there were dozens of small pills laying quietly inside. Their shapes were round, and their 5 stripes of pill patterns were shining brightly. Minor Extreme Grade Essence Return Pill. It could directly bring in half a year's worth of cultivation. One had to know that this was Lin Bai's first time refining pills, and it was unexpectedly smooth. There was no sign of an explosion in the furnace, and the quality of the pills was still of the highest grade. If others were to find out, their jaws would probably drop in shock. After all, even an experienced alchemist would occasionally have the risk of an explosion in the furnace, let alone guarantee the grade of the pills. However, this was the first time Lin Bai concocted pills, and he had almost reached the peak of others. Lin Bai swallowed it without hesitation. Soon, a warm current surged up, and countless spiritual power surged into his meridians. He did not expect the medicinal effect to be so fast. He was once again dumbfounded. He did not know that ordinary essence return pills, no matter how high the quality was, would need some time to take effect. However, this batch that he concocted was actually able to come into effect in an instant. He did not know if it was because of this little broken furnace. Lin Bai's blood chi surged all over his body, and his cheeks were slightly red. His entire body had gained a few years of cultivation out of thin air, and it was as if his entire body was unable to exert its full strength. After consuming the Essence Return Pill, there was a special characteristic that required the user to spread its effect. Moreover, this pill was of minor extreme grade quality. After all, it could bring about half a year's cultivation in an instant. He had to stretch out all the muscles and bones in his body in order for the medicinal properties to be able to disperse and achieve the best effect. The best way was to fight a battle. Seeing that there were still some materials left, Lin Bai, on the principle of not wasting them, threw them all into the small broken furnace. He estimated that he should be able to refine another batch. Lin Bai divided out a small portion of the Sun True Fire to warm the pill furnace. He sensed that the qi in his body seemed to have become hotter, and he knew that he had to start dispersing the medicinal effect as soon as possible. Otherwise, once the medicinal effect had worn off, the effects would be greatly reduced. I reckon there wouldn't be any demonic beasts here. This area was the territory of the 3-headed exploding crocodile. He still needed to walk a little further. As expected, after Lin Bai walked out of the crystal lake, he encountered a few more demonic beasts. It was just that they no longer had a cultivation as high as the 3-headed crocodile, so it was too easy to deal with them. At the same time, some of the students from the 4 grade academies also bumped into each other by chance. Compared to the high-spirited state they were when they first entered the secret realm, they were now in a sorry state. There were more or less some wounds on their bodies, and it was obvious that they had experienced a lot of beatings. When I first entered the secret realm, I encountered a demonic beast at the first level of the Xiantian state. I spent a lot of effort to cut off one of its hands, but in the end, I actually let it escape. Not only were there heavy casualties, but we also didn't get anything. It's really unlucky. The people from the Sword Cultivation Academy were dejected, and the people from the Body Cultivation Academy beside them couldn't help but show sympathy. Then we are even more unlucky. We originally wanted to pick the exquisite fruit, but who would have thought that its guardian demonic beast was actually at the third level of the Xiantian state, the Howling Moon Ice Wolf. If we didn't run fast, I'm afraid we would have become dinner by now. We are the same. Those demonic beasts are each harder to deal with than the last. Until now, we haven't even taken a breather. Even if we don't die in the mouths of those demonic beasts, we would die from fatigue. The people from the several large academies ridiculed one after another. After hearing the other party's encounter, they were like brothers in distress. No one revealed a gloating and mocking expression. After all, they weren't any better off. I don't know if you have felt it, but the overall level of the demonic beasts we encountered in the Mystic Essence secret realm this time has increased quite a bit. Compared to the students who were in a sorry state, the leading teachers seemed much more relaxed. Unless the safety of their lives was truly threatened, they wouldn't make a move. Roar. A beast roar came from not far away. The students who had just experienced a fierce battle were like frightened birds. They looked over in astonishment and saw countless flying birds hovering in the air. They vaguely heard several loud noises. They looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. Could it be that another demonic beast has run over? Can we even catch our breaths? Everyone was talking at the same time. Unlike them, the leading teacher had a high cultivation level, and his spiritual sense could cover a wider area. He could feel that there was a powerful spiritual power in front of him besides the demonic beasts. There seems to be someone over there. Let's go over and see what's going on. The moment he finished speaking, a beam of fire shot into the sky, almost burning half of the sky. Even the white clouds had turned bright red, and there was a faint heat wave coming from it. This was definitely not something that demonic beasts could cause. Everyone looked surprised. No way. Which big shot could cause such a big commotion? Could it be from the Sword Cultivation Academy? After hearing this, the people from the Sword Cultivation Academy hurriedly shook their heads and said, "It shouldn't be from our academy. Our academy focuses on swords. This spiritual power is more likely caused by the battle techniques of pet beasts." The other people's gazes fell on the Beast Tamer Academy one after another. They were also completely confused, without any thoughts. From our academy? That doesn't seem to be the case. I remember that although there are a lot of fire-type beast pets, none of them are as powerful as this. Could it be that some low-key big shot has been hiding his strength all this time, so we don't know? It was needless to say that those who cultivated in talismans mainly relied on talismans. Although their spiritual energy wasn't strong, there was a possibility that they had all sorts of strange talismans. As for the people from the Body Cultivation Academy, they could be excluded. After all, they were all training their bodies and using objects to enter the Tao. They didn't have much contact with spiritual power. From the looks of it, it didn't seem like anyone from any academy. When everyone got closer, the more they looked, the more shocked they were. Along the way, countless towering trees were broken at the waist, and the ground was in a complete mess. One could imagine what kind of battle this person had gone through, and everyone gasped in amazement. When they rushed over, a 7-star demonic beast, the heaven-piercing pangolin, fell down with a loud crash, and a figure stood in front of them. After seeing its appearance clearly, everyone said in unison, "It's him." It was Lin Bai, one of the 3 people who had been despised previously. Looking around, he did not see any other people, and an unbelievable thought appeared in everyone's mind. Could it be that he had dealt with the sky-piercing pangolin alone? Seeing that Lin Bai was the only one around, the leader's expression changed slightly. "Why are you alone? Where are your other teammates?" One had to know that the secret realm was fraught with danger, which was why they had asked everyone to form a team. If danger arose, there would be people who could look for an opportunity to seek help. Lin Bai was alone. If he really encountered something that could not be solved, he might not even know how he died. If there were really casualties, the leading teacher would also take responsibility. Lin Bai shrugged helplessly. I'm by myself. I've mentioned joining other teams, but no one is willing to take me. Moreover, you never said that no one is allowed to act alone, right? The leading teacher was rendered speechless by him. His gaze fell on the people from the other academies. Seeing that Lin Bai wanted to blame them, the people from the Body Cultivation Academy had a bad temper. They could not stand it immediately. What do you mean by no one is bringing you along? Don't you know what you're capable of? Don't you know to take the initiative to quit so that you won't drag others down? That's right. You still have the face to blame others for not bringing you along. Now, it's our fault. Lin Bai looked at the arrogance of this group of people and sneered, I'm just a burden to others. Since you guys are so powerful, then just make your move. Don't complain. Everyone thought that they were hearing things. This person was at the tail end of an ordinary academy and had just broken through to the Hoteon state, was actually so arrogant and wanted to challenge them. What was the difference between this and an egg hitting a rock? They had always been the only ones who were insolent. Now that they had met a person who was even more insolent than them, the people from the big academies were instantly in an uproar. Agree to him. Beat this arrogant brat to the ground and let him know how powerful we are. The captain of the Body Cultivation Academy, Luo Yulin, did not hesitate. He directly rolled up his sleeves and said, Since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish. After saying that, he was about to walk forward. Wait a moment. Seeing that Lin Bai suddenly spoke, Luo Yulin revealed a contemptuous smile. Why are you afraid? It's not too late to regret now. As long as you kneel down and kowtow to me 3 times and call me Grandpa, this matter will. Before he could finish his words, Lin Bai spoke slowly. All of you can attack together. I didn't hear wrongly, did I? What did he say? Everyone thought that they were hearing things. Lin Bai, on his own, actually said that he wanted to single-handedly fight the 10 people from the Body Cultivation Academy. Even the most powerful people from the Beast Tamer Academy and Sword Cultivation Academy didn't dare to say this. One word, arrogant. How arrogant was he? Brat, your strength isn't that great, but your tone isn't small. Lin Bai's casual expression made Luo Yulin's fists creak. He wanted to punch him in the face. The other people from the Body Cultivation Academy also glared at him. These words were undoubtedly humiliating them. Since you've already spoken, as seniors, we'll teach you the principles of being a person. Under the leadership of Luo Yulin, the people from the Body Cultivation Academy surrounded Lin Bai. They burst out with tyrannical power and saw an endless stream of towering green mountains appearing before everyone's eyes. Their bodies emitted several rays of divine light that were overflowing with colors. Their auras were extraordinary. With every step they took, the ground would shake. It was as if they were giants from ancient times, walking amidst the vast mountains. Seeing the deep pit footprints they had left on the ground, the people from the other academies were filled with emotion. As expected of the Body Cultivation Academy, they forged their bodies and entered the Tao through martial arts. With such a terrifying aura, I'm afraid ordinary people won't be able to break through their defenses. It was indeed the case. Unlike talisman cultivators and beastmasters, the people from the Body Cultivation Academy didn't need to wear any defensive magical treasures because their bodies were the strongest armor. The few of them shouted at the same time, and a strong wind instantly blew around them. A strange fluctuation spread rapidly toward Lin Bai with them as the center. Even the others who were watching the battle at the side also retreated dozens of meters to avoid being affected. Luo Yulin took a step forward and said, Move the 5 mountains. He drew a strong air current with his hands, and a few giant trees nearby were actually broken at the waist, as if he had really pushed something. In the next second, a giant palm appeared in the air, covering the sky and the sun. It mercilessly pressed toward Lin Bai. Under the giant palm, everyone were like ants, unable to resist at all. Lin Bai's expression was the same as usual. He stood where he was, and his deep eyes were like a calm, ancient well. What's going on? Is he scared silly? He even forgot to resist and escape, and he's still acting tough even now. Hee, wasn't he arrogant just now? If you have the ability, then continue acting so arrogantly. This move is indeed powerful. Body cultivators are able to take a beating and fight. Even we have to spend some effort to deal with them, not to mention this kid. Everyone discussed animatedly. They believed that Lin Bai would definitely lose. Even Luo Yulin's eyes revealed a hint of contempt. However, in the next second, his expression suddenly became dull. The towering green mountain and the ancient giant, which were originally unstoppable, were about to crush Lin Bai's body. However, they seemed to have been blocked by something and were actually unable to advance any further. When everyone saw the two gigantic creatures stop in midair, they looked at each other in bewilderment, not knowing what they were up to. Little did they know that the faces of the people from the Body Cultivation Academy had turned pale. The powerful spiritual pressure on their bodies made it difficult for them to breathe. Everyone sank into the ground, as if they could still hear the sound of bones breaking. What's going on? In comparison, Lin Bai's expression was relaxed. Luo Yulin and the others were the ones who had exerted the force, but now it seemed to have been reversed. The others also noticed that something was wrong with the people from the Body Cultivation Academy and said in confusion, "Why do I feel that the situation a little strange? The one suffering should be this brat, but why does it seem like it's the other way around?" Luo Yulin gritted his teeth and persevered. His forehead was covered in sweat. "This brat is a little strange. Let's end this battle quickly." Everyone exerted their strength in unison. The giant finally took a step forward. He suddenly raised his foot with an unstoppable momentum, wanting to trample Lin Bai under his feet. Seeing this, Luo Yulin and the others finally let out a sigh of relief. However, they only heard a cry of surprise. "Look at what that is." Gorgeous tail feathers streaked across the sky like a brilliant meteor, crashing into the towering green mountains and the giant at an extremely fast speed. A billowing heat wave assaulted their faces, and Luo Yulin and the others were like cooked prawns. Their faces were extremely red. It was as if they saw a red sun slowly rising. Before they could react, the red light was just inches away from them. Their pupils suddenly constricted, and they finally saw the creature at the center of the flame. It was a scarlet luan that was emitting golden light all over its body. It was as if a phoenix had descended into the world. It was so piercing that one could hardly open their eyes. The enormous pressure made one's legs go weak. Forget about escaping. At this moment, their minds were completely blank, and their entire bodies were drenched in sweat. The towering green mountain and the ancient giant were blasted away. On the other hand, Lin Bai seemed as if nothing had happened. Everyone smelled a burning smell. The hair of the people from the Body Cultivation Academy was charred black, and their clothes were also burned to the point of holes of varying sizes. They looked no different from the beggars on the streets. It was truly too miserable. Even so, there were still people who were unconvinced. "This is nothing. You're just relying on your pet beast. If you have the power, you can fight on your own." As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Bai finally moved. His hands formed a seal, and his entire aura changed. It was as if even his bones and blood were flashing with a golden light. He looked indestructible, and those who did not know him would think that he was the one from the Body Cultivation Academy. Boom! He suddenly punched out, and it was as if the mountains were collapsing and the earth was cracking. The stars fell, and an unstoppable fist and tint swept over. Being swept by this strong wind, everyone felt a chill on their foreheads. Countless pieces of hair fell to the ground, and they were instantly overwhelmed with shock. The people from the other academies were flabbergasted. What kind of fist technique is this? It actually has such a powerful force. Luo Yulin and the others were greatly shocked. They had also sensed the power of this move, so they hurriedly gathered all the strength in their bodies and once again condensed a huge shadow in the air. However, it was only the fist wind, and the shadow had already dissipated before it had fully formed. At this moment, Luo Yulin and the others already had the intention to retreat. They regretted agreeing to Lin Bai's duel. Unfortunately, it was too late for them to regret now. Bang! A huge crater was created on the ground. Lin Bai knew his limits and did not want to kill anyone. He was still some distance away from the body cultivator students, but even so, they were still blasted everywhere by the wind from the fist. Everyone's expression was blank. There was only one thought in their minds. Where did this monster come from? Is he really from 5th high school? We can't even defeat his pet. We thought that bird was powerful enough. We didn't expect him to be even stronger. No wonder he dares to act alone. We underestimated him before. The scarlet swan docilely perched on a nearby branch. Its golden feathers and gorgeous tail feathers were like fine gemstones, pleasing to the eye no matter how one looked at it. However, everyone thought about the flames just now. The temperature was so high that it seemed as if their entire bodies were about to melt. The remaining heat had clearly not dissipated yet, but they couldn't help but shiver. They only felt their scalps go numb. A human and a beast had defeated the body cultivator students in such a manner. It was estimated that they would need some time to recover. Now that they had lost their fighting strength, it was obvious that they would not be able to explore the Mystic Essence secret realm for a while. If everyone knew that Lin Bai had a little green whose fighting strength was on par with the Scarlet One, who knew what they would think? I did not expect that the people from the 4 great academies would be wrong this time. The Body Cultivator Academy has suffered a great setback this time. Exactly. Now that they are in this state, I guess they can only leave the Mystic Essence secret realm to recuperate. If they miss this opportunity, they will suffer a great loss. If I had known that Lin Bai was so powerful that even the people from the 4 major academies couldn't compare to him, I would have teamed up with him. I would have definitely obtained a lot of benefits. The people from the other academies were whispering among themselves. On the other hand, the faces of the 4 major academies were as ugly as they could be. Although the Body Cultivator Academy was defeated by Lin Bai, they were also implicated. After all, they had mocked Lin Bai a lot back then. The Body Cultivator Academy's tragic defeat would inevitably give everyone the illusion that the other academies were no match for Lin Bai. The people from the Talisman Cultivation Academy and the Beast Tamer Academy could not stand it anymore. They were determined to get back at Lin Bai. Otherwise, if this matter were to spread out, the reputation and honor of the 4 great academies would be tarnished. Don't be too pleased with yourself. It was just a fluke. You relied on your high-tier pet and Luo Yulin and the others' carelessness to defeat them. The people from the Beast Tamer Academy snorted coldly and stepped forward. When everyone heard this, their expressions were all different. The people from the Talisman Cultivation Academy hurriedly added, "That's right. It was just good luck. You might not be so lucky next time. I want to challenge you. Do you dare to accept it?" The people from the Talisman Cultivation Academy and the Beast Tamer Academy spoke one after another. However, Lin Bai's expression changed, and he turned around and walked to the side. Everyone was a little confused. "What? Are you afraid? That's why you don't dare to accept our challenge. As expected, you're a coward." Lin Bai's voice was indifferent. "I'm not free now. My medicinal pills are almost done." As his back was facing them, no one could see what he was doing. They only thought that he had found a random excuse to avoid them, and immediately burst into laughter. "Forget it. Why don't you find a better reason? Do you really think that we are as gullible as 3-year-old children? Why did you suddenly change into a pill concoctor?" Many people had contemptuous looks on their faces, thinking that Lin Bai did not dare to accept the challenge. Lin Bai appeared in front of everyone with a small broken furnace. By the end of the core formation stage, the Grand Sun True Fire had already become much smaller. Due to the suppression of his aura, it looked no different from an ordinary fire. When everyone looked at him, they thought that he was cooking with fire. Someone asked in disbelief, "This is your pill cauldron?" Lin Bai nodded, and at the same time, he drew out strands of spiritual energy to warm the small broken cauldron. When the Talisman Cultivator and the people from the Beast Tamer Academy saw this scene, they almost laughed until their stomachs ached. "You actually call this pill refinement? You're clearly cooking food." The small cauldron was pitch black, as if it had been burned by smoke and fire for many years. If it weren't for the 3 legs, it would be hard to tell that it was the shape of a cauldron. An ordinary pill concoctor, even if they were at the lowest level, would find a way to buy a good cauldron. After all, cauldrons had a greater impact on the quality of medicinal pills. Moreover, inferior cauldrons were easy to blow up. At that time, the medicinal ingredients and demonic beast inner cores that were put in would all be wasted. In order to avoid great losses and expend energy, they would all pursue a cauldron of good quality. It was unlike the thing in Lin Bai's hand. It was pitch black and did not have any aura. It was as if it had just been dug out from a rubbish heap, making it look very shabby. And the fire under it? What the hell is all this? Everyone looked at the weak flame. They could almost not feel its heat. It looked like it was on the verge of collapse. They were really worried that if a gust of wind blew over, it would be extinguished. This cauldron and this little flame. Are you here to be a joker? If this setup can be used to concoct a pill, I can even swallow the ashes of the cauldron. As soon as he finished speaking, a faint medicinal fragrance came from the air. It felt like a person who had walked in the desert for many days had finally tasted a mouthful of sweet rain. Just this fragrance alone was refreshing and intoxicating. Lin Bai looked at the person who had spoken just now. The corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. What did you say just now? This is impossible. How can you concoct a medicinal pill? Everyone did not dare to believe it. However, that medicinal fragrance could not be faked. Everyone knew that if the quality of a medicinal pill was high, there would be a strange phenomenon. Lin Bai opened the furnace. A faint green smoke instantly burst out like a spring. The withered leaves around him caused from the battle before grew tender green branches once again. The pure aura of life burst out, and the plants flourished, nourishing all things. In an instant, it was as if one could hear the sound of melting. The light green fog gradually dissipated, but the inside of the cauldron flickered with spots of golden light, like the pearl of the vast sea, appearing incomparably mysterious. Inside laid 4 round medicinal pills. The surface was smooth, without a trace of crack. There were also a few circles of golden patterns surrounding it, making it seem even more precious. Just by looking at them, one could feel a powerful energy, let alone consuming them. Great Fortune Pill. Some people who knew the value of the pill shouted out the name of the pill. It was an existence that was even more powerful than the small fortune pill. Lin Bai was actually not joking. He was really refining pills, using the broken furnace and the unremarkable fire that they had just mocked. He actually took advantage of the fight just now to concoct a batch of pills? No way, no way. He just casually concocted it like that, and he even concocted 4 extreme-grade pills that are in perfect condition. As everyone knew that refining pills was extremely dependent on the environment. In the environment just now, when Lin Bai was fighting with the body cultivator students, his aura was modeled. If it was accidentally absorbed, it would easily affect the quality of the pills. From the looks of these pills, they were not affected at all. It could be seen how much control he had over the cauldron. One had to know that pill cultivators were extremely rare. They didn't belong to the normal awakening profession, so they were rare in number. Their status was very high. Even if they were a low-star pill cultivator, no one dared to underestimate them. If they were able to refine top-grade pills, even grandmasters would have to give them some face. There were even some who could refine heaven-defying pills. They could extend their lives and revive the dead. Even a grandmaster would have to lower his head when he saw such being. After all, who didn't experience calamities? It wasn't scary to offend a pill cultivator, but what was scary was the big shots behind the pill cultivator. Moreover, Lin Bai himself was very powerful. Now that he had refined such a medicinal pill, one could imagine his future. Everyone's gaze immediately became fiery. Big Boss Lin, I was blind just now. You're a very magnanimous person, so don't be mind people like me. I have the 4-star spiritual treasure grass that I just picked here. It's well preserved. Big brother, do you need it? He quickly took out a light green plant from his storage bag. The leaves were tiny and looked like stars. They grew beside the cliff and took a lot of trouble to pick. Wow, he actually beat me to it. The person beside him rolled his eyes and said disapprovingly, hurry up and move aside. You only have 4-star medicinal plants, yet you still have the nerve to take them out. Big brother, I have 5-star demonic beast inner cores here. Take it as an apology for what happened just now. Everyone was secretly regretting in their hearts, asking them to be courteous in front of Lin Bai. One by one, they started to rummage through their storage bags. What was the best way to curry favor within Pill Cultivator? Of course, it was to send all kinds of materials. In a short while, colorful demonic beast inner cores and all kinds of medicinal plants were placed in front of Lin Bai for him to choose from. Even the smiles of the teachers who led the team became especially cordial. They asked if Lin Bai was injured or not. Laying on the ground, the people from the Body Cultivation Academy looked at the scene in front of them. Lin Bai was like the stars surrounding the moon, while they were covered in dust and dirt. No one cared about them, and they had lost all their dignity and face. Luo Yulin was angry and anxious. He was so angry that he actually spat out a large mouthful of blood. His companion beside him exclaimed, "Captain!" He wiped his mouth to show that he was fine. In a hoarse voice, he said, "Let's go." The people from the Body Cultivation Academy had no choice but to help him leave. At this point, who would help this group of defeated people? Before he left, Luo Yulin turned to look at Lin Bai, his expression becoming more and more ruthless. "I won't let him off just like that." No one noticed their departure. Many of the people from the academy threw olive branches at Lin Bai one after another. With such a big shot around, not only could he fight, but he could also refine pills if they were injured. Who wouldn't want to be on his good side? "Big shot, you come to our team. We'll give you half of all the resources. You have the right to choose any natural treasures or panaceas first." There was even someone who introduced himself. "Big brother, although you are very powerful, do you need a helper by your side? I think I am quite suitable." There was even someone who licked his face and made up nonsense. "Big brother, actually, I have wanted to invite you since the beginning. Just based on your temperament, you are definitely not someone refined to this pond. It's just that I have never had the chance to say it out loud. I hope you can give me a chance this time." He was really too shameless. In the face of everyone's enthusiasm and flattery, Lin Bai naturally knew what they were thinking. It was human nature to seek benefits and avoid harm. When they thought that he was a burden, they would avoid him as much as possible. Now that there were benefits to be found, they naturally surrounded him. Lin Bai was used to it and said, "There's no need. I'm used to being alone." Seeing Lin Bai's indifferent expression, everyone turned their noses up. It was no wonder that he was like this. The people who had rejected Lin Bai back then were now so regretful that their intestines had turned green. They couldn't say anything more as they were afraid that they would annoy boss. The leading teacher only told Lin Bai to be careful before leading the rest of the people away. Lin Bai watched them leave and spread out his spiritual sense. After making sure that there was no one else, he turned around and found a quiet valley to transmit his power. After the satisfying battle just now, the medicinal effect had completely spread out. Lin Bai felt that his entire body was filled with power, and he was like a small furnace. Ding! The host has passed on a year's worth of cultivation to Little Green. The 300-fold return has been successfully triggered. The host has received 300 years of cultivation. Intense golden light shot out from Lin Bai's body, and the entire valley was shrouded in the light, emitting a vague pressure. The golden light shot straight into the clouds, as if there was a living being swimming in it. A vague dragon's roar drifted between the heaven and earth. If someone looked down from a high place, they would definitely find that the golden light was distributed in a very regular manner, converging into the shape of a giant dragon. In the mystic essence secret realm, the boundless mountains were endless. The shadow of the giant golden dragon could be seen among them, as if it was hovering among the mountains, patrolling its territory. Streams of dragon chi slowly gathered and surged in a certain direction. Little Green was wrapped in layers of golden light, forming a cocoon. Lin Bai could feel the surging energy in its body. He was relieved to know that Little Green was safe and sound. At this moment, the leading teacher, who had already walked far away, suddenly stopped in his tracks. An unprecedented pressure enveloped his body, making his heart palpitate. However, it was fleeting, as if it was just an illusion. The other students had not reached that level of cultivation yet, so they did not notice anything. Seeing him suddenly stop in his tracks, the students around him thought that there was a demonic beast attacking them. They immediately fell into a state of alert and asked nervously, "Teacher, what's wrong?" The leading teacher shook his head. "Nothing." He turned around and looked. The distant mountains were verdant, and there was a sense of mystery in them, causing people to feel a sense of awe. "Let's continue walking." Everyone felt that the journey was extremely smooth. "It's so strange. When we came here, we met many demonic beasts. Why is there not a single one left now? Not to mention demonic beasts, we didn't even see any ordinary animals. How strange. Where are they hiding?" The people from the academy were discussing animatedly. What they didn't know was that those demonic beasts and animals were all cowering in their caves. Those with higher intelligence lowered their heads devoutly. As if they were pilgrims, they were worshipping something. That direction was where Little Green and Lin Bai were. The ancient pressure that was engraved in their bloodlines couldn't be erased even after many years. Now that it had been awakened, even if this king hadn't been fully born yet, the pressure that it emitted was still not to be underestimated. Not only Little Green, but even Lin Bai had undergone a huge change. One had to know that in his previous life, he had the worst luck. The cards he drew from card drawing game had always been the lowest level R card, but now that he was the king of luck, he triggered a 300-fold return. An incomparably huge magic array appeared beneath his feet. The white light and the golden light were on par. In the end, they slowly interweaved together, appearing incomparably noble and dignified. His meridians continued to expand, and countless amounts of spiritual energy surged into them. If Lin Bai's meridians were only the size of a lake previously, they were now no different from a huge river. From head to toe, even his hair was stained with a dazzling divine brilliance. His eyes were like lightning, making it even more difficult for people to look at him directly. It was as if a god from the 9 heavens had descended. First level of the Xiantian state, second level of the Xiantian state. The speed was like riding a rocket. It went all the way to the 5th level of the Xiantian state before it slowly came to a stop. Finally, it was stuck at the position of being one with the world. Lin Bai observed the changes in his body and exclaimed, "If I can trigger the few hundred times return a few more times, it won't be difficult to cross this state of being one with the world." It was another great harvest. Lin Bai, who was immersed in joy, did not know that Luo Yulin had brought the people from the Body Cultivation Academy to seek outside help. In the towering mountains, a group of people dressed in dark blue robes walked among them. The brooch on the upper left corner of their clothes was shining brightly, showing off its sharpness and radiating cold light in all directions. It was the shape of a sword, clearly the symbol of the Sword Cultivation Academy. On their waists, there were long swords of different sizes, as if they were enlarged versions of the brooch. This group of people were the other students of the Sword Cultivation Academy. They were led by Bai He, the most powerful team in the academy. They could be said to be able to kill gods and Buddhas when they encountered them. The man walking at the front was Bai He. He was handsome and had deep facial features. His eyes were extremely cold and carried a sword-like sharpness, as if there was no warmth at all. To be more precise, his entire person was like a treasured sword that had not been unsheathed. However, even if it had not been unsheathed, one could still feel the cold chill coming from the front. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. Before anyone could react, they heard his deep voice. "Be on guard." The instant his voice fell, the towering ancient tree not far away suddenly broke apart, giving everyone a fright. The people from the Sword Cultivation Academy were well trained. They quickly adjusted their formation and prepared to defend and attack. Sha-sha. The strange sound came from afar and came closer. It was like a blower, but also like the heavy breathing of some creature. Countless birds were startled, and the sound of the tree falling to the ground was accompanied by the sound of it being crushed. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the southeast direction. There were black shadows running through the bushes that were half the height of a person. They could vaguely feel the fishy smell. The creature seemed to have noticed them and quickened its pace. Someone cried out in surprise, What is that?" Black scales and a body whose head and tail could not be seen. Its scarlet eyes stared coldly at everyone, as if it was looking at a dead person. It was still hissing and spitting out its tongue. When it stood up, it blotted out the sky and covered the sun. It was actually an 8-star black water poisonous python. Its saliva dripped onto the ground and instantly burned a big hole. As it spoke, the black water poisonous python swung its tail and quickly launched an attack. Although its body was huge, it was extremely agile. It was like a black ghost, and everyone's heads were instantly covered by a layer of the shadow of death. Buzz. However, there was someone who was faster than it. A sound of contention came from the air. It was the sound of a sharp blade being unsheathed. A cold light suddenly appeared, and a divine weapon containing supreme divine light appeared in front of everyone. Bai held a long sword in his hand and stood in front of them. The sword was about 3 feet long and extremely thin, but it seemed to be forged from ice and snow. It was impenetrable, and there were mysterious and unfathomable totems carved on it, as if it contained supreme divine power. The hilt of the sword was actually in the shape of a dragon's head, and there was actually a crystal-clear pearl in the dragon's mouth. It was shining brightly, and one could tell at a glance that it was not an ordinary item. It was said that this was a treasure sword that was forged by a master-level blacksmith. It was called Dragon Spring. The people who were initially panicking gradually relaxed at this moment. With eldest senior brother's help, there's nothing for us to do anymore. A hint of hesitation flashed through the black water python's eyes. Having gained intelligence, it clearly knew that this man in front of it was not someone to be trifled with. However, Bai did not give it any time. With a wave of his long sword, it seemed as if even the air could be split into two. The sword chi swept across, and the towering ancient tree cracked. The cut was extremely smooth. Roar! The black water python let out a painful cry. Its sturdy scales were all overturned by the sword chi, revealing red flesh and blood. It was as if black rain was falling from the sky, and scales fell all over the ground. Eldest senior brother's cultivation has improved quite a bit. He looks even more powerful than before. Everyone sighed with emotion. The black water python spat out large mouthfuls of black mucus towards the Bai. Wherever it passed, the ground would corrode, and the vegetation would rot. Bai was neither fast nor slow, and the dragon spring swept across the sky, bringing with it the power of mountains and rivers. Countless spiritual chi gathered at the tip of the sword. Strands of spiritual chi were like a waterfall. He suddenly swung his sword downwards. The power of the sword was unstoppable. The black water python rolled on the ground in pain. Dust flew into the air, and the ground shook incessantly. Many people were almost swept away by its tail. Die. Bai was expressionless as it slowly spat out a word. It was already too late for the black water python to escape. The ice-cold blade was already within reach. Boom! After a loud sound, the black water python's body broke into two. Just like the towering ancient tree from before, its black inner core rolled out. Bai did not even look at it. Suddenly, his gaze was like lightning as he looked to the side and shouted sternly, "Who is sneaking around? Come out." "It's me." A few people walked out. It was Luo Yulin and the others. It turned out that Luo Yulin was on good terms with Bai. To be more precise, Bai was the superior one. It was also fortunate that they did not encounter any demon beasts on the way. Otherwise, the injured Luo Yulin and the others would not have been able to find Bai. Who would have thought that they would encounter the scene of Bai hunting black water poisonous pythons as soon as they arrived here? Looking at the bodies of the people from the Body Cultivation Academy who were covered in dust and dirt and in a sorry state, the people from the Sword Cultivation Academy were very puzzled. What happened to you guys? You guys are actually in such a sorry state. Luo Yulin revealed a smile that was uglier than crying. Boss, you have helped me. The reason why we are like this is all because of that stinky brat called Lin Bai. After listening to his story, everyone became even more baffled. One had to know that even if the Body Cultivation Academy was at the bottom of the 4 great academies, it was still not something that ordinary people from the ordinary academies could deal with. But now, they were beaten up by a nobody from the 5th high school, and they were beaten up to such a state. If word got out, it would simply be a disgrace. Bai frowned and said in a cold voice, "The 4 great academies are about to lose all their face because of you." Luo Yulin did not dare to retort, but he placed the blame on Lin Bai. If it were not for him, he would not have fallen to such a state. He was afraid that his reputation as a body cultivator student would be at the bottom of the 4 great academies. Boss, you really can't blame us for this. It's just that little brat is too strange. He's clearly at Xintian level 1, yet he can challenge those of a higher level. Also, his pet beast is also very abnormal. After hearing Luo Yulin describe the scene of his battle with Lin Bai, he, who was originally indifferent, suddenly became more interested. Hearing what you said, he should be very strong. Luo Yulin immediately showed a fawning smile. No matter how strong he is, he's not as strong as you, boss. Ha 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 ha. Knowing that he was just flattering him, he only raised his eyebrows. In that case, I'll go and meet him. Luo Yulin was overjoyed and quickly led the way. When they reached the place where they had previously challenged Lin Bai, they found that there was no trace of him. This is where we fought before. The lingering power had not completely dissipated. The fallen trees and the messy ground all told him that they had experienced a great battle here. Judging from the traces left on the battlefield, this Lin Bai was indeed quite capable. He formed a hand seal and muttered to himself. A cold light flashed in front of them and guided them. That was the northwest direction. He shouldn't have gone too far. The group quickly chased after him. The strange thing was that they didn't see any demonic beasts along the way. However, their focus was on Lin Bai, so no one bothered about him. Not long after, a figure appeared in front of them. His gaze was burning, and Lin Bai seemed to have noticed it as well. He turned around, and their gazes met in midair. A deep and unfathomable lake was flickering with a faint light, and a stream of snow that didn't melt all year round. The cold air assaulted their faces, giving them the feeling that they had met their match. You are Lin Bai? He sized up the man in front of him, and a faint dark light burst out from his eyes, landing on Lin Bai's body. Then, he was a little surprised. He actually could not tell the depth of Lin Bai's cultivation. Even the spiritual sense he released disappeared without a trace. Lin Bai's expression changed. He sensed the cold air surrounding his body. His body trembled slightly, and the spiritual power instantly dissipated in the air. In just an instant, the two of them had gone back and forth, and in everyone's eyes, the two of them were still looking at each other. Lin Bai looked at Luo Yulin and the others, as well as the powerful man in front of him. He immediately understood that the person who came was not friendly, and he said with an indifferent expression, I am. Initially, he only thought that Luo Yulin was exaggerating. Now that he saw the real person, he finally understood that Lin Bai had something up his sleeves. Otherwise, why would they lose so miserably? His interest grew even greater, so he went straight to the point. I want to fight you. Do you dare to accept the challenge? Lin Bai had already rejected the previous challenge from the Talisman Cultivation Academy and the Imperial Beast Academy. According to the rules, he could not reject the challenge again this time. However, Lin Bai had never thought of rejecting it. After all, he had just broken through and was stuck at the state of being one with the world. Little Green was still one step away. Coincidentally, someone came to challenge him, giving him a chance to practice. Ordinary demonic beasts were like cutting melons and cutting vegetables to Lin Bai. It was useless to fight them at all, and it was a waste of time. Only an expert like Bai he could help him gain enlightenment in the battle. What benefits do I get if I beat you? Hearing Lin Bai's question, Bai he seemed to have heard a joke. He curled his lips, as if he was sure that he could not lose. Even so, he still opened his mouth and said, If you win, I will hand over the treasure map of the secret realm. If I win, you will hand over all the pills you have refined. The expressions of the Sword Cultivator Academy and the others changed slightly when they heard that. How can eldest senior brother use the treasure map of the secret realm as a bet? You came here for that? Bai's tone was ice cold as he said, Don't tell me you think I will lose? Everyone thought it made sense. Bai was young and famous, but he had been through hundreds of battles. He had never lost before, and this time was no exception. There was a sword tomb in the secret realm. It was said that the world-famous sword was buried there. The divine sword had a spirit, and after its master died, it would return to the sword tomb and be sealed until the next fated person arrived. All the sword cultivators in the world had a common goal, which was to obtain a suitable sword. Although the dragon spring sword in Bai's hand was also a slightly famous existence, he still wanted to take a look. If the divine sword could approve of him as its owner, his combat power could easily improve by 100 times. He had been stuck at Xintian 8th level for a long time, but he was unable to break through. Perhaps he could borrow the power of the divine sword and break through in one go. This was also the reason why Bai had come here. Naturally, Lin Bai had heard of the legend of the sword tomb, but that location was extremely difficult to find. Without a map, it was impossible to enter. Then it's a deal. The moment he finished speaking, the two of them retreated at the same time. They actually had a tacit understanding. Bai unsheathed his sword, and he could vaguely hear the sound of jade. It was like an iceberg colliding with an iceberg, and in an instant, it felt as if the sky and earth were collapsing. The snow-white body of the sword was extremely dazzling. He waved his sword and slashed out. A powerful air current swept over. It was as if the 9 heavens and the Milky Way were coming in mighty waves. It could be said that it flew down 3,000 feet. One could see the enormous dragon body in the Milky Way. What kind of undulation was it? It went against the current and rushed up to the 9 heavens. One after another, it swallowed clouds and exhaled fog. It was extremely shocking. The huge air current shook everyone and forced them to retreat tens of miles away. Only then did they manage to stabilize their bodies. Even they were the same, not to mention Lin Bai, who was in the middle of the battlefield. Where the tip of the sword was pointing, the sharpness was revealed. It gathered the power of 10,000 long dragons. It was like the roar of the Yellow River. The scene was shocking. He is indeed powerful, Lin Bai said to himself. He did not dare to underestimate the enemy. If he had not broken through earlier, he might not have been able to dodge this lightning-fast strike. His figure was like a flowing cloud in a cool breeze. It was hard to figure out where he would appear. He shuttled through the group of dragons as if he was dancing with the dragons. Seeing that Lin Bai had actually dodged, he put away his previously indifferent expression. Sure enough, you have some skills. No wonder Luo Yulin and the others were defeated by you. However, I'm not a motley crew like them. Luo Yulin and the others, who were called Motley Crew, were not angry when they heard this. They only looked on excitedly, wishing that he could beat Lin Bai down in the next second so that they could vent their anger. Lin Bai dodged to the side and leaped forward, dodging the sword chi that was rushing towards him. Even under such a dense attack, his breathing was still calm and there was no rush. It was clear that he was at ease. In my eyes, you are no different from them. Lin Bai's words drew the hatred of all the sword cultivator students. Damn, this kid is too arrogant and forgot a bit. Eldest martial brother must teach him a good lesson. Do you think that you are invincible after dodging a few moves? Eldest martial brother hasn't even used his ultimate skill yet. If he had used it, how can this kid would still be so arrogant? Bai's gaze became even colder. Although he didn't say anything, the sword in his hand gave an answer. With a wave of his long sword, boundless sword chi surged over and gathered above him. Suddenly, a vortex appeared and was spreading out in all directions. Sword lights and sword shadows tore apart the surrounding space. In an instant, the sky changed color. The sky was gloomy, and rustling snowflakes rose. His sword chi could actually affect the weather. It could be seen that he had reached the peak of perfection. No one has ever dared to say such words to me. You will pay the price for your actions. Bai's tone was calm, and no other expression could be seen on his face. However, those who were familiar with him knew that he was angry. Even the other students of the Sword Cultivation Academy revealed expressions of fear. Last time, when eldest martial brother was angry, I remember that person's end was terrible. All of his tendons and ligaments were broken by the sword chi, and his spirit vein was completely destroyed. It could be said that he had no choice but to beg for death. He also seemed to be a solo cultivator. Relying on his high cultivation, not only did he challenge the Sword Cultivation Academy, but he also injured several students. Everyone was whispering, and their voices were much lower, as if they were afraid of disturbing some existence. Snowflakes sprinkled down, and in an instant, the ground was covered in a vast expanse of whiteness. If it was a different scene, it would be fine to enjoy the snowy scenery, but unfortunately, under the cover of the silver clothes, it was full of killing intent. Each snowflake carried the sword chi of the Bai He. The coldness was bone-piercing, and even the circulation of spiritual power became sluggish. Lin Bai exerted force from his palm, but frost chi came out. Countless water vapor rose, and the white fog shrouded his entire body. Fortunately, he had the protection of the Grand Sun True Fire, and these gases were instantly evaporated. Little Red. A bird's cry suddenly appeared in the sky. At the same time, a huge fireball fell from the sky and smashed a huge pit on the ground. The temperature that had been lowered suddenly rose, and the snowflakes were instantly vaporized. Even the thin ice on the ground gradually melted. The scarlet swan dragged its gorgeous tail feathers and appeared in front of everyone. A tuft of hair in the middle of its tail was abnormally gorgeous. It was blazing with flames, and its entire body was emitting golden light. As it flapped its wings, the surrounding temperature increased by quite a bit. Even the earth seemed to have signs of rejuvenation. But he narrowed his eyes slightly. This scarlet swan is indeed extraordinary, but unfortunately, his tone paused. With a raise of his hand, his sword was like a dragon. The cold wind blew, and powerful sword chi descended once again. The world was filled with strong gales that blew so hard that people almost couldn't open their eyes. The wind was like a bone-scraping knife that ignored the defense of spiritual power. It pierced deeply into the bones and blood, and all the meridians and blood in the body felt as if they were frozen. Even the flames around the scarlet swan were much weaker. White mist rose and wrapped around its wings, limiting the burning of the flames. But he learned from Luo Yulin that Lin Bai had an extremely talented fire-type pet beast. Therefore, he used a top-tier ice-type cultivation technique, so that the strength of the scarlet swan could not be fully released. One sword parting worlds. He only lightly swung it. There was no gorgeous and complicated move, but it gave people great sense of danger. The mighty wind and snow instantly crushed over. It was as if Lin Bai was in an uninhabited wilderness, and all he could see was the vast land. Suddenly, a sharp sword light attacked. It was a sword that could split open the sky and earth. The snow mountains collapsed, and the world shook. Lin Bai was locked by the sword light, and he could hardly move. This time, eldest martial brother will win for sure. His beast pet is suppressed and can't do anything at all. Just when everyone thought that Lin Bai would lose for sure, a cocoon with a green glow appeared in front of him. It was Little Green, who had not broken through yet. Bai's attack was completely blocked by it. It only left a white mark on it, and not even a crack. There was not even a single opening. A row of question marks floated in everyone's mind. What the hell is this thing? Could it be that Lin Bai has another pet? What kind of pet looks like this? From the looks of it, it's not breaking through, is it? If a pet was disturbed during a breakthrough, it would at least fail to break through. At worst, it might even lose its life. The bystanders all knew how powerful Bai's attack was. However, after the attack just now, the cocoon didn't have any wounds. It was obviously uninjured. It looked very stable. Those who didn't know would think that it was a magic artifact with extremely high defense. Even Bai's eyes flashed with surprise. Although he couldn't see clearly what the pet beast inside the cocoon looked like, judging from its aura, it should be of the water element. So what if it blocks my attack? It's just a matter of time before it fails. Although he said so, Bai looked at the cocoon floating in the air and Lin Bai, who hadn't made any moves all this time. He had a strange feeling in his heart. He felt that it was better to end the battle as soon as possible. 10,000 swords returning to the origin. Bai moved, and the dragon spring sword slashed forward fiercely. Mountains and rivers were cut off, and stars fell. The pressure of destruction made many people shiver. The sky and earth were filled with sharp sword light. The sword chi raged, destroying everything in its path. The sword that was originally a long sword transformed into countless densely packed swords. The tip of the sword carried a majestic aura as it pointed directly at Lin Bai. No matter how good his movement technique was, he would not be able to dodge this attack. This was because Lin Bai had no way to escape. In this world made of sword chi, Bai was the king. He looked down from above, his eyes filled with coldness. The green cocoon seemed to be unable to withstand the sharpness and began to tremble violently. The green light flickered, as if the creature inside had been affected by something and was extremely unstable. If nothing unexpected happened, it should be impossible to break through. It was about to fail, but Lin Bai's gaze remained calm. He believed in Little Green's strength. I told you, eldest martial brother will definitely win. He's just a clown who overestimates himself. The people around looked as if they were watching a good show. No matter what the creature inside the cocoon was, it would not be able to block Bai He's attack unless it was a true dragon. Countless dragon spring swords appeared in the air. They weren't ethereal at all. They possessed the full power of their true forms. The powerful sword chi almost tore the entire world apart. The tip of the swords pointed straight at Lin Bai. He was enveloped within them and would be pierced into a hornet's nest in the blink of an eye. Even if the green cocoon tried its best to protect him, he was still an insignificant existence amidst the sword light that filled the sky. Bai He seemed to be conscious, and his eyes were filled with a sharp aura. It's time for everything to end now. He waved his sword gently, but a huge wave surged into the sky, and the entire world was about to be devoured by the majestic sword intent. The head of the dragon spring sword transformed into a dragon, swallowing clouds and exhaling mist as it whizzed away. Crack! A crack finally appeared on the green cocoon, and it spread rapidly around like a spider web. Everyone could vaguely see the green scales on it flash and disappear like jade. Roar! The dragon's roar resounded in the sky. Everyone's bodies trembled, and they actually had the urge to kneel down. No one saw that not far away, the birds and beasts that were originally hiding in the cave had all walked out. Their expressions were pious as they lowered their heads toward where Lin Bai was. Even those who had yet to develop their intelligence could feel an extremely terrifying aura. If someone were to walk in this area, they would definitely discover an extremely strange scene. Even those enemy species were able to coexist peacefully at this moment, looking in the same direction. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the mystic essence realm, the students who were fighting with some demonic beasts suddenly discovered that those demonic beasts seemed to have gone mad. They desperately wanted to break out of the encirclement, but they didn't want to continue fighting. They ran into the distance, and then quickly disappeared into the dense mountain forest. What's wrong with these demon beasts? They seem to have suddenly gone mad. Their combat power has become so high. Why did they all suddenly run away? This year's Mystic Essence Mystic Realm is really too strange. We either can't find them at all, or they run away after finding them with much difficulty. Everyone was discussing among themselves. Some curious people used their fast flying magic treasures or cultivation techniques to chase after the beasts to see what was going on. However, they encountered many magic beasts on the way, and it seemed that they were all heading in the same direction. Among them, there was no lack of high-star magic beasts. Out of safety considerations, they did not go any deeper. When they came back, they told their companions about it, which caused the crowd to be puzzled. Could it be that some spiritual plants of heaven and earth are about to bloom, which is why these demonic beasts are like this? After thinking about it, the crowd could only think in this direction. The magic beasts rushed to the valley where Lin Bai was. When they were still some distance away, they stopped in their tracks. It seemed that they were afraid of disturbing some kind of existence, so they did not dare to go any further. The people in the valley did not know what was happening outside and thought that it was caused by the dragon spring sword. The dragon spring sword is indeed extraordinary. From the sound of it, it doesn't seem to be any different from a true dragon. The people from the Sword Cultivation Academy looked at Bai He enviously. Their hearts were filled with respect and awe. However, they did not see Bai He's ugly expression. Although the dragon spring sword in his hand was powerful, it had never been like this. His suspicious gaze landed on the cracked cocoon. Bai He actually felt that the dragon's cry was coming from inside. Boom! A loud, earth-shaking noise was heard, startling everyone. A huge light was emitted from the cocoon, illuminating the entire sky. At the same time, the dragon's cry became even clearer. The wind and clouds in the sky changed. The dark clouds slowly gathered together. There was actually a rhythm of rain. Even the sky could not bear the huge weight, and it felt like it was about to collapse. The sky became darker and darker, and a fierce wind suddenly blew, making everyone waver. In an instant, the sky and earth fell into darkness, as if chaos had descended. They couldn't even see their own fingers. After a while, everyone finally realized what was going on. Looking at this scene, it doesn't seem like the dragon spring sword can cause it. What on earth is going on? Their voices were blown into pieces by the fierce wind, and they couldn't hear clearly at all. But he held the dragon spring sword in his hand, and his expression was no longer as relaxed as before. At some point, his palms started to sweat. He's just pretending to be mysterious. After saying that, he swung his sword without hesitation. Boom! A thick bolt of lightning suddenly streaked across the sky. With a thunderous sound, the lightning almost tore the sky into two halves. With the help of this light, he could vaguely see the eyes of two beasts. They were filled with supreme pressure, as if an ancient beast had awoken. His heart palpitated, so much so that he almost lost his grip on the dragon's spring sword in his hand and dropped it on the ground. It must be known that it was a big taboo for sword cultivators to be unable to hold their swords steadily. In the darkness, everyone seemed to sense that something had passed by. They could barely see the cold scales and the endless body, and cold sweat broke out on their backs. Everyone's vision was blocked, but Lin Bai could see it clearly. The dragon head in the clouds gave people an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was none other than Little Green, who had already broken through. Its body was more than 300 meters long, and it could not be seen at a glance. It seemed to be able to encircle the entire world and soar in the sea of clouds. It became strong when it encountered a strong opponent. Panic came in waves. He clearly wanted to escape, but because of the power of this unknown creature, he could only stay where he was and could not move. Sword swallowing mountains and rivers. He did not give up. He wanted to swing his sword again. However, this time, the darkness finally dispersed. The green cocoon in front of Lin Bai was no longer there. Instead, it was replaced by a small green snake. Looking at the pair of green eyes, his hand suddenly stopped in midair. For some reason, he suddenly thought of the beast's eyes in the darkness just now. At this moment, Lin Bai's aura was getting higher and higher. After reaching a peak, his aura had undergone an earth-shaking change. There was no aura at all, and he looked like an ordinary person. His aura had completely dissipated. However, it was Lin Bai, who looked like an ordinary person in front of him, who made he take half a step back. For the first time, he, who usually had no expression on his face, showed a shocked expression. He had reached the Heaven Man Unity state, which was the Grandmaster state. He hadn't even been able to break through to the 8th level of the Xiantian state. Yet Lin Bai had just broken through. I lost. The dragon's spring sword in his hand fell to the ground with a crisp sound, as if something had been broken. Before anyone could react, they saw the dragon spring sword in his hand fall to the ground. Then, he lowered his head and admitted defeat without any struggle. He admitted defeat just like that? Did I hear wrong? What's wrong with eldest senior brother? Admitting defeat so easily isn't his style. No one noticed that his hand, which was hidden in his robe, was trembling violently. At this moment, not to mention fighting, even wielding a sword was a problem for him. The gazes of the Sword Cultivation Academy and the others fell on Lin Bai. Only then did they realize what had happened. Damn, how did he advance? Everyone could see the obvious change in Lin Bai's aura. Although they didn't know what his true cultivation level was, someone who could make he lower his head must have already reached the state of Heaven Man Unity. One had to know that even he had been stuck at Xiantian 8th state for a long time, yet he had never broken through to the next state. Lin Bai had only fought for a while, but he had an epiphany. It was simply amazing. I've heard that some people become stronger when they encounter someone stronger. They are able to constantly break through in battle, especially when they are in a life-and-death situation. When they are in danger, they are even more able to stimulate their own potential. I have always treated it as a joke, but who would have thought that I would get to see it now? As everyone knew, one had to be fully focused in a battle. After all, Swords and sabers had no eyes, and every strike was lethal. A sudden breakthrough sounded easy, but it was extremely difficult to put it into practice. If one did not break through at that time, they would end up suffering backlash. That would not be worth the loss. Everyone sighed with emotion. They looked at Lin Bai as if they were looking at a monster. The gap between people was really big. Bai's expression was gloomy. He was no longer as high-spirited as before. He revealed a mocking smile. There's always someone better than you. I admit defeat. He took out a roll of craft paper from his storage bag and handed it to Lin Bai. This is the map of the Sword Tomb. Lin Bai didn't stand on ceremony. He picked up the map and walked away, feeling as if he didn't care about anything. Bai stared at his retreating figure for a long time. Finally, he let out a faint sigh. The disciples of the Sword Cultivation Academy gathered around him and asked in confusion. Eldest senior brother, even if he has made a breakthrough, he has just entered the threshold of the Heaven-Man Unity state. Why don't you fight with all your might? The outcome is still unknown. It doesn't seem like your style to admit defeat so easily. Bai revealed a bitter smile. As Lin Bai walked away, the pressure on his body seemed to have finally dissipated. However, there was still a lingering shadow in his eyes. Do you think I don't want to? He slowly picked up the dragon spring sword on the ground. It was clearly a simple action, but he seemed to have spent a great deal of effort to do it. This is... Everyone cried out in surprise. They finally saw clearly that the originally flawless dragon spring sword actually had a bone-deep crack on its body. It looked extremely dazzling. This crack extended from the hilt to the end of the sword. There was no doubt that if it were to suffer even the slightest bit of damage, it would probably be completely broken into two. It seemed that this extremely precious dragon spring sword, which was forged by a master, was completely crippled. Even if it was repaired, its foundation would be destroyed, and it would not be able to unleash the power of its former peak. He hasn't even made a move yet. My sword has already been destroyed, and my Tao has already been defeated. How can we talk about fighting anymore? Everyone stared at the crack. A gust of cold air assaulted their faces, and they were speechless for a long time. For sword cultivators, the sword was one with the person. If the sword was dead, the person was dead too. Now that the dragon spring sword was destroyed, it was no wonder that Bai directly admitted defeat. This was the only way to preserve his last bit of face. Otherwise, if he really waited for Lin Bai to make his move, everyone subconsciously shivered, not daring to imagine that scene. Lin Bai still did not know what kind of shock he had brought to the people of the Sword Cultivation Academy. He waited until he found a quiet place before he stopped and summoned Little Green. A green light flashed and an ancient pressure descended, as if a true dragon had awakened. Previously, in order to avoid being too high-profile, Lin Bai had allowed Little Green to use the illusion technique in front of everyone. Only when it made a breakthrough could its true appearance be seen. Only now did he take a good look at Little Apple's appearance. The two small bumps on its head had completely grown out. It was obvious that they were in the shape of a dragon horn, and the claws on its abdomen had become even sharper. Its body had grown much bigger than before. At least it was not as long as a hemp rope, and no one could look down on it. It was awe-inspiring. Although it was not fully mature yet, it was already in the form of a baby dragon. What surprised Lin Bai the most was that all 6 of its skills had been upgraded. The headbutt had been upgraded to True Dragon, playing with Pearl. The Iron Tail had been upgraded to Divine Dragon, swinging tail. The Poisonous Fog had been upgraded to Soaring Clouds and Mist. The Water Cannon had been upgraded to Tornado Rain Strike. The Binding had been upgraded to Dragon God Seal. The Bloodline Suppression had been upgraded to Dragon Roaring in the 9 Heavens. Just the names of these skills sounded cool enough. Lin Bai didn't know what it would look like when he used them. He was looking forward to the next battle. Gulp, gulp. He didn't notice that he was hungry just now, but now that he was free, he could feel it. After all, it was a battle and a breakthrough. The consumption was too much. Even an Iron Man wouldn't be able to bear it. Lin Bai didn't carry much dry food with him. He planned to get some ingredients on the spot, catch some game, or roast some fish to eat. He looked around and found that this place wasn't far from the Crystal Lake. After going around in circles, he came to the original place and found that the Crystal Lake from before seemed to have changed its appearance. The surface of the lake that was previously as clear as a mirror was now muddy, as if a mirror had been broken. It was stained with all kinds of stains. The shore was full of aquatic plants, some stinky fish and rotten prawns, and there was an indescribable strange smell in the air. Lin Bai could not help but frown. If not for the surrounding environment and the few trees, he would have really thought that he had gone to the wrong place. What's going on? It turned out that the 3 exploding crocodiles were originally the kings of the Crystal Lake. They usually relied on their high cultivation to bully other weak magic beasts, so their subordinates were especially arrogant. Now that the 3 exploding crocodiles had fallen, their subordinates did not dare to seek revenge. After all, their boss had just ended up like that. If they ran over, they would undoubtedly be handing themselves overly. They dispersed in a hubbub, and the Crystal Lake was also extremely chaotic. Oh right, this Crystal Lake is its nest. The 3 exploding crocodiles should have hidden a lot of good things. Lin Bai rolled his eyes and immediately thought of a plan. He called Little Green to suck away the water in the lake. Little Green soared into the air and directly hit the lake with a tornado. A huge vortex appeared on the surface of the lake like a tornado. The lake water was also sucked in, and the level of the water dropped rapidly. In a short while, the bottom was reached. If there was anything good, it would have been divided up by the 3 exploding crocodile subordinates. This time, apart from a few aquatic plants, there were also some rotten rocks and pearl clams, but there was actually nothing. Lin Bai looked around and called out his bad luck. Suddenly, his gaze paused. What is that? Lin Bai walked closer to take a look and pushed aside the water plants in front of him. Only then did he realize that it was actually a completely black turtle. It was like black jade, shining with a sparkling light. However, there were wounds all over the turtle's back. Its flesh and blood were tumbling, and fresh blood kept flowing out. Even the turtle's shell was missing a big hole. It looked very terrifying. It just stood there motionlessly. If it wasn't for its weak breathing, Lin Bai almost thought it was dead. Sing. Black jade black turtle with black tortoise bloodline detected. The system's voice in his mind immediately made Lin Bai ecstatic, and he immediately made a contract with the black jade black turtle. His blood dripped onto the turtle's back mountain, and a huge spell formation lit up, enveloping both the man and the turtle. It didn't take much effort to contract the black jade black turtle. After all, it was covered in wounds, and it didn't have any strength to resist. If Lin Bai hadn't discovered it, it probably wouldn't have been able to survive for long. White light repaired the wounds on the black jade tortoise's body. After a while, the wounds slowly healed. The black jade tortoise opened its eyes and stared at Lin Bai with its bean-like eyes, carrying a hint of trust and reliance. It knew that this was its savior. Lin Bai stared at its pitch-black shell and pondered for a moment. As expected, he didn't disappoint the crowd and said that simple and uncreative name. From now on, you shall be called Little Black. Fortunately, Little Green and Little Red could not speak human language at this time. Otherwise, they would definitely ridicule Lin Bai, and the colorful battle team would have another great general today. Since they got a new member, he had to pass on his cultivation to celebrate. Ding! The host passed on 10 days of cultivation to Little Black. 50 times return has been successfully triggered. The host has received 500 days of cultivation. Golden light burst out from Lin Bai's body, in the shape of a small sword condensed in the air. It was small in shape, but it was filled with supreme majesty, as if it contained the power to split the heaven and earth apart. One look, and one could tell that it was definitely not an ordinary sword. The sword emerged from the top of his head. 3 flowers gathered at the top, and a lotus bloomed below. All the spiritual energy was poured into the sword, causing the illusory figure to become more and more solid. Finally, with a shio sound, it entered his body. At this moment, Lin Bai had awakened his 4th profession, sword cultivator. As expected, every time he contracted a divine beast, an additional class would be awakened. Perhaps this was the mechanism of the return mechanism. Before Lin Bai could think too much, the old shell on Little Black's body slowly fell off and was replaced by a brand new shell. There were no impurities on the back of the turtle. It was extremely pure black, like a black spiritual jade. Even the patterns on the back of the turtle were very well organized. as if they contained the movements of the stars in the sky, or the arrangement of the 5 elements of the 8 trigrams, it faintly revealing an ancient aura. All in all, Lin Bai studied for a long time, but he still could not figure out what was going on. Even Little Green and Little Red came over. They were chattering at the side, as if they were arguing. No one knew what they were talking about. Lin Bai wanted to laugh when he saw the two of them. One was a dragon, and the other was a red Luan that was about to evolve into a phoenix. They were of different species, yet they were still making noises. Now, they had a friend who was going to be a black tortoise in the future. Then, they were only missing a white tiger. Maybe when you evolve next time, you'll know what the pattern on it means. Lin Bai patted Little Black's back. Little Black also stuck its head out and nodded spiritually, as if agreeing with him. Other than the changes on Little Black's back, it was no different from before. However, the aura around it was more extraordinary than before, and its strength had also increased. After a short rest, the man and 3 beasts were ready to go to the Sword Tomb. According to the location marked on the map, the Sword Tomb was located in the deepest part of the southeast corner of the Mystic Essence Mystic Realm. Along the way, they encountered very few magic beasts, which greatly increased Lin Bai's speed. Just as they were about to pass through a dense forest, they heard the sound of thin ropes coming from ahead. Lin Bai could not help but become vigilant and cautiously approached. He saw a group of people not far away. They were armed with treasured swords, and their aura was extraordinary. The leader of the group was dressed in a black brocade robe, and the sleeves and hem of the robe were embroidered with auspicious clouds patterns with golden threads. They looked extraordinary. He held a folding fan in his hand. He did not look like a cultivator, but more like a young master from an aristocratic family. He was confronting the other people, and it seemed like there was a dispute. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and hand over the 7-star silver-scaled grass. Otherwise, don't blame us for not being polite. 2A. Just now, we clearly said that the capable will get what they want. Our senior brother lured away the silver-scaled grass's guardian magic beast. We also spent a lot of effort to pluck this grass. Not only did you guys sit on the sidelines and watch, but you also try to take the grass. In your dreams. The group of more than 10 people were unmoved when they heard this. They retorted, "We've already said that the capable would obtain it. Do you think that you guys can beat us?" Those people were so angry that their faces were completely red. You guys are clearly acting like bandits. If senior brother comes back, he will definitely teach you guys a lesson. The young master folded his fan and his gaze was filled with coldness, but he did not show it. In that case, let's wait for your senior brother to come back, and then we will have a good showdown. After saying that, he turned his body to the side and gave a signal to the people beside him. Those people really thought that they would give up and walked over without any vigilance. Lin Bai couldn't help but frown when he saw this. These people obviously didn't come with good intentions, so how could they let them go so easily? In the blink of an eye, miserable screams rose one after another. A cold light flashed in the air. The dozen or so people unsheathed their long swords, not giving them any chance to react. Before they died, their eyes were wide open, as if they had not expected that these people would be so shameless. The young master kicked them to the ground fiercely. Naive, how could I let a cooked duck fly off? Suddenly, his gaze was like a knife, coldly scraping towards Lin Bai's position. Who's there? Show yourself. Everyone was on high alert. Lin Bai had no intention of hiding after being discovered by him. He simply walked out and said with an indifferent expression, "I'm just passing by." Their gazes met in midair. After saying that, he calmly withdrew his gaze as if he did not see the bloody scene on the ground. Goodbye. It was very common for people to kill and steal treasures in the mystic realm. Lin Bai did not want to meddle in other people's business. Moreover, he was not familiar with this group of people. He did not know the cause, the process, and the outcome of the matter. However, this brocade-robed young master's way of doing things was really disgraceful. Looking at Lin Bai's retreating figure, the people beside the brocade-robed young master hurriedly asked, "Do you want to?" There was killing intent in the latter's voice. However, the young master waved his hand and said, "Forget it. To be able to walk alone in the mystic realm, One must either be powerful or got separated from his teammates. If it's the former, we don't need to cause trouble again. If it's the latter, I don't think he'll have anything good on him. After the group of people finished dealing with the bodies, they also walked toward the southeast. Lin Bai followed the directions on the map and walked toward the southeast direction. The vegetation became less and less. When he stepped into the yellowish-brown land, his field of vision was completely open. The sky was low, and there were no clouds. It was as if heaven and earth were connected in a single line. Not far away, there was a stone tablet. It looked like it had been there for many years. After experiencing the wind and rain, it stood there. What was surprising was that the handwriting on it was still clear, as if it had just been written. Sword Tomb. The iron hook and silver painting were filled with a murderous aura. It was as if one could really see countless sword lights and shadows. In an instant, countless chills assaulted one's face. Even though Lin Bai was slightly surprised, he knew that he had already reached the boundary of the Sword Tomb. Lin Bai continued to walk forward. He could see a large tomb. There were all kinds of swords on it. They were of different shapes, sizes, and all kinds of different shapes. In short, there was nothing that he couldn't think of and nothing that he couldn't see. He kept his eyes fixed on the tomb and continued to walk inside. The swords placed outside were all ordinary. The real good swords should be in the inner part of the tomb. However, the deeper he walked, the more he could feel the cold wind scratching his bones. It was as if countless swords were cutting his body back and forth, and he could still hear the sound of golden spears. Fortunately, Lin Bai's body was strong, and he had opened up his spiritual defense shield in time. His entire body was covered in a layer of faint golden light, and he looked extraordinary. Even so, after walking for a while, his body was still slightly stinging. His originally light footsteps gradually became heavy, as if he had bound 500 kilograms of black iron. If an ordinary person were to walk in it, they would probably be reduced to a skeleton halfway through. Lin Bai finally understood why there were no traps outside the Sword Tomb. So the true power lay in this place. Now, there was already such a great pressure just at the outer perimeter. He did not dare to imagine what would happen, what the scene would be like, if he were to go deeper into the Sword Tomb. It was also strange. The Sword Tomb seemed to be close at hand, but it was far away in the horizon. After walking for so long, there was still quite a distance. No more, no less. It was exactly 100 steps away. Lin Bai knew that he must have fallen into some kind of spell formation, but he was even more surprised. He actually did not notice anything. It was enough to show the mastermind of the person who set up the spell formation. This spell formation was natural, but he could not find any flaws. It was as if it had merged with the Sword Tomb. Lin Bai originally wanted to break the spell formation, but after thinking about it, he still felt that it was a little inappropriate. Putting aside the fact that he could not find the core of the spell formation, if he broke the spell formation so rashly, he might trigger other mechanisms in the Sword Tomb and fall into an even more dangerous situation. That would not be worth it. Lin Bai continued to walk forward calmly. The strong wind around him grew stronger, and tens of thousands of sword shadows wrapped around him, making it almost impossible for people to open their eyes. His steps were moving even slower. At this moment, he was actually like a snail. At this speed, who knew when he would be able to reach the Sword Tomb? Crack, crack. A faint cracking sound rang in his ears, as if something was collapsing. Lin Bai felt a chill on his face, and blood dripped down from it. He did not know when the defensive barrier had been broken, but a cold wind was blowing. The strong winds finally found a way to break through, pouring in one after another. The defensive barrier was on the verge of collapsing, like a small boat that had been knocked over by the waves in the wind and rain. It was completely submerged in the deep sea, finally turning into countless pieces. The golden light on Lin Bai's body had dimmed quite a bit. When it was completely destroyed, he was afraid that he would also be torn into pieces by the strong winds around him. Retreat and live, advance and die. A voice came from the void, sounding like a clap of thunder. The road ahead was still far away, as if it would never end. The gales became even stronger, as if anyone who stepped into it would be beheaded. However, an exit appeared behind him. As long as he turned around, he would be able to stay away from danger. Lin Bai only stopped in his tracks and walked forward without any hesitation. Seeing that he did not know what was good for him, the voice laughed coldly. A fierce wind whistled over and opened its bloody mouth towards him. It swallowed his entire body. In the next second, Lin Bai slowly opened his eyes. His vision gradually became clear. Not far away was the entrance of the sword tomb. It was an extremely ordinary feeling. There was no divine light bursting out, nor was there any sharp sword intent. Those who knew that this was the sword tomb, and those who did not, thought that it was no different from those caves that covered the mountains and plains. Lin Bai had passed the test himself, but he had never thought that it would be so dangerous. He had fallen into the formation without detecting anything. If he was not strong, or if his mind was not firm, he would be cut into pieces by the sharp sword intent in the surroundings. He could not hold on until now. Even the choice to turn back just now was a trap. If he had chosen to turn back then, he would have been cruelly swallowed by the formation. Not even a bone of him would be left. Sword cultivators should press forward and face difficulties head-on. It was despicable to retreat halfway. They were not worthy of holding a sword. That option seemed to give people a chance to live, but in fact, it was a dead end. From ancient times until now, there were actually quite a number of people who reached the sword tomb. However, the number of people who were able to successfully take the sword was very few. Most of them were defeated here. There was not even a complete corpse left of them, so very few people knew the secret behind it. Little Black, you guard the outer perimeter of the sword tomb. If there is any movement, report immediately. Little Green, Little Red, you guys guard the door for me. Considering that the Black Turtle's defense was excellent, Lin Bai let it guard the door. After arranging everything, Lin Bai walked into the sword tomb without hesitation. The sword tomb buried many treasured swords. It was said that even the sword immortal who was the best in the world buried his sword here before he retired. Many people hoped to obtain this sword. However, after many years, there was no news. Some people said that this sword had already been taken away. Some people said that this sword was not here at all. Some people said that this sword had already gained sentience and had left the sword tomb a long time ago. It had gone to follow its master. In short, there were many different opinions. No one was sure if the sword existed in the sword tomb. Even so, there were still many people who came one after another. After all, if one obtained the sword, it meant that one would obtain the sword immortal's inheritance. That was a great opportunity. Even if it was a dragon's den or a tiger's den, one would still have to go through it. I wonder if I will have this opportunity today to see the true appearance of the divine sword. The interior of the sword tomb was a little dark. One could not see the surrounding environment clearly. However, there were some small specks of light floating in the air. They were like fireflies, filled with stars. They looked very beautiful. What are these specks of light? Lin Bai observed for a moment. After confirming that there was nothing harmful, he could not help but approach to take a look. Who would have thought that at this moment, a small speck of light swayed over? The little light dot rested on Lin Bai's fingertip and rubbed against it intimately before finally revealing its full appearance. Green light suddenly appeared, as if a long green dragon had appeared out of thin air. The dragon's roar soared through the 9 heavens, and even the mystic realm seemed to shake along with it. The little light dots that were slightly dimmer were pushed aside one after another. The few light dots scattered in the air were not evenly distributed, but they were getting closer and closer to Lin Bai's position. Lin Bai looked at the green light sword in front of him. He had thought that Bai's dragon spring sword was already the best sword in the world. He did not expect it to be a few levels lower than this. They couldn't be compared at all. This sword was sharp and could cut iron like mud. Lin Bai gently pulled out a strand of hair and put it on it. It was actually broken in half. If the dragon spring sword was here, Lin Bai would not have had to make a move, and the sword would have been injured by this sword chi. It is indeed a good sword. The word green edge was engraved on the hilt of the sword. It lived up to its reputation and showed its sharpness. Lin Bai held the green edge long sword, and his aura seemed to have become incomparably sharp. With an indomitable aura, he cut through the darkness. However, in the end, he actually slowly put down the sword. Although you are very good, You are not the sword that I want in my heart." The instant he finished speaking, the green-edged sword once again transformed into a speck of light. As if it had received an incomparably heavy blow, it disappeared into the darkness with a whoosh. Lin Bai raised his head to look. The specks of light around him had changed from the numerous stars before to only a few kittens. They were probably influenced by the Qingfeng sword earlier. Another small speck of light landed in front of him. In an instant, purple qi came from the east. It was as vast as a waterfall and erupted in the secret realm. Purple mist swirled around, and one could vaguely see the body of the sword. It was brilliant and dazzling. A purple star slowly rose in the air and suddenly shone with a powerful light. It set off the dim environment around it as if it was daytime. In the end, it condensed into the shape of a long sword. At this moment, the ruler ruled the world and all the stars submitted to him. The few light spots that were originally close to Lin Bai started to flicker with light and actually became dim. In the end, they disappeared into the darkness. The sword that was shining with divine light and surrounded by purple qi appeared in Lin Bai's hand. The body of the sword was 3 feet long and had an image of the Big Dipper. Each of the stars on it contained the power of the sky. It looked extremely noble and magnificent. The one in the middle was Ziwei Star, the master of Do Shu, the heavenly emperor star. The stars twinkled as they welcomed the arrival of the emperor. The Ziwei Star twinkled continuously as if it was hinting that Lin Bai would choose him. 7-star Ziwei sword. Lin Bai stroked the body of the sword. His eyes were full of surprise. Even someone like him who didn't know anything about swords could understand how extraordinary this sword was. Not to mention that this sword also had the power of thousands of stars. It had many transformations, and its lethality could be imagined. Unfortunately, he still shook his head. He always felt that the 7-star Ziwei sword was a little too flashy. The 7-star Ziwei sword froze in mid-air, as if it couldn't believe that Lin Bai actually rejected it. If it were anyone else, they would have long been impatient when they encountered such a treasure sword and wanted to worship it as their ancestor. Although there were very few people who came to the sword tomb to successfully take the sword, there were still a few. The difference was that they risked their lives and spent a lot of effort to chase after those light spots. It could be said that it was a battle of wits and courage to be able to make a treasured sword submit to them. There were also those who were unlucky. Even if they passed the test of the sword catacomb, they were disliked by the treasured sword. In the end, none of them were willing to acknowledge their master. So there were even some who returned empty-handed, who was like Lin Bai, who stood where he was and did nothing, only to have the treasured sword approach him. The key was that he still refused, and he even rejected 2 of them. If this news were to spread outside, who knew how many people would be so angry that they would vomit blood? Comparing people was indeed infuriating. Lin Bai did not know about the others, and he thought that this was how the treasured sword chose its master. After rejecting 2 treasured swords in a row, the few light spots became hesitant, as if they were worried that Lin Bai would reject them. After a moment, a dim light spot appeared in front of Lin Bai. How could the light spots that were left behind after being in the wake of Green-Edged Sword and the 7-star Ziwei sword be ordinary? What appeared in front of Lin Bai was a pitch-black and transparent black iron heavy sword. The body of the sword was more than 4 feet long, and it was much wider than the other swords. It looked extremely thick and heavy, as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Lin Bai stretched out his hand and weighed it. It weighed 81 pounds. Ordinary people could not even pick it up, let alone use it in battle. Most people might think that the black iron heavy sword was too heavy and not as light as ordinary swords. However, once this sword was brandished, its power would be unrivaled, and it would be able to split heaven and earth. Ordinary weapons could only go back and forth, and they could not withstand the power of the black iron heavy sword at all. Lin Bai hesitated for a moment and picked up the black iron heavy sword. He actually felt that it was easy to handle. The black iron heavy sword could be used for offense and defense, and it was also more in line with his intentions. However, he still chose to put it down in the end. For some reason, there was a voice in his heart that told him that these swords were not what he wanted. The black iron heavy sword did not move at all, as if it was trying to persuade Lin Bai to let him think about it carefully. You will also meet a more suitable master than me." Having said that, the black iron heavy sword understood that he had made up his mind. It immediately stopped hesitating and turned into a streak of black light that disappeared into the air. When the other light spots saw this scene, their figures also gradually disappeared. Be it the green edge sword, the 7-star Z-Way sword, or the black metal heavy sword behind them, they were all top-notch swords in the sword tomb. Lin Bai rejected them one after another. The swords had a spirit, so it was inevitable that they would feel that he was too picky. Lin Bai had walked all the way to the end, but there were no new light spots. Could it be that he was going to return empty-handed this time? Lin Bai looked around and thought that this trip to the sword tomb was just like that. Suddenly, he stopped as if he had kicked something, and only a clang could be heard. He picked it up and looked at it. It was actually a sword